Hi, welcome to the bathtub, where we hear this song.
Singing in the bathtub, Harris once again, watching all my troubles
Go
swimming down the drain.
swimming down the drain. Watch your troubles go swimming down the drain with Tweety Bird, the immortal Tweety Bird, Les Brown, and his band of renown, and Dodo's does a little background solo on that if you listen to the whole thing. Anyway, this is another. We're doing some quick ones here. We've had a bit of a hectic day. I always like to make up some excuse for why these are such an inarticulate and useless talks, but they're basically just to keep me off the streets, and they do. They keep me off the streets. Anyway, this is Pure Mountain Water, Cruel Light of Day. We're going to talk a little bit. We're gearing up to read a book I think we've talked about before. Shevin Gur by Andrey Platonov. Platonov. You say Platonov, I say Platonov. And I'm sure I'm saying it wrong one way or the other. It's a very big, long, beautiful, from what I've read. I've only read passages of this book, Shevin Gur, a book which is kind of a bit of a magic realism in Russia during the 20s and 30s. It had a huge amount of trouble getting it published. And I don't think it was ever properly published in Russia until the 80s. It was kind of passed around. It was one of those books that was kind of well known for not being published. And Platonov was held in high esteem by every Russian writer I met. Everyone from Russia I ever met always told me this was the greatest writer of the 20th century. I'm not in a position to compare him, but what I've read I've really liked. I've read him in the past, and I've read passages of Shevin Gur as it's been translated by the great, I think, Robert Chandler and his wife Elizabeth Chandler, are kind of the brave, that's not brave, they're kind of the incorruptible souls of Russian translation. They go out and they really fight for their writers, and they really do a good job on their work, and they spend a lot of time. And getting this book, I know he's been working on it for at least 20 years, more than 20 years, because that's when I was in contact with him about some other books he published by Platonoff. And anyway, I'm getting ready to read that, and I started to go back and read some books I actually read 25 years ago, which have been republished by the New York Review of Books, who have sort of taken up the banner of Platonoff. And in the past week or two, it was actually a couple of weeks now, I read this. This is his novel called The Foundation Pit. It's not a long novel. It was again, these books were written in the 20s, 30s. I don't remember what this was published. The 40s. I don't remember. And it's during Stalin's elimination of the kulaks. I guess that's 30s. I don't remember. My Russian history is not great. It's considered one of Platonov's most important books. Shevin Gur is considered his masterpiece. Anyway, I read it and I reread it again recently in the new version that the Chandlers have put together with another translator, Olga Mirson. A lot of afterword material, lots of kind of historical material. About a third of it is that, with a huge long history of it and a huge appendix. Again, they really do really lovely work, and it's pretty much, I think, only published by the New York Review of Books. This volume, it's a short novel. It takes place during the period of Stalin's kind of trying to take over the countryside, and he's trying to collectivize all the farms. And the people that he thinks stands in his way, and what Stalin and his bureaucrats think stands in his way, this class called the kulaks. Don't quote me on anything of data or information, because I always get things wrong. But basically, the kulaks were kind of a class of peasants, farmers, who were doing really well. So they maybe ran lots of different farms, and people worked for them, and they were fairly successful, and they were making money, and they were sort of capitalists, as close to capitalists as you could get at that time, I guess, in the countryside. And they were really difficult. When Stalin wanted to take their food, they were making a big fuss. So he was trying to get rid of this. There was a notorious phrase. He said, "We want to eliminate the kulaks as a class." And the greatest violence many people think Stalin committed was really against this class of people in the countryside and the control of these farms. Anyway, I don't want to talk about the history. I really want to talk about just the novel itself. The novel is sort of a satire on these collectivized farms, and it's about a group of people, very, very different people. So there's a laborer, and there's a a daughter of a kind of kulak farmer. There's a bunch of different characters. There's a guy who works for the Soviet government who's trying to get everyone to work together, and they're all building something called the foundation pit, to build a home which is supposed to be a place where all these collectivized peasants can go and live and be happy. So the idea of building this house is to tell everybody, look, there's pie in the sky. When we're done, we're going to have these lovely houses for you. And in the course of the book, it's described as surreal. It has a very surreal quality to it. It isn't really magic realism, from what I can tell, but it's about all these different characters and the kind of violence that starts to occur in the countryside, and nobody knows who's committing some of the violence, and all these different people working together on this pit for various reasons, because they're forced to do it or because they believe in the future of the Soviet government and so forth. And then there's all these political apparatchiks running around trying to control things. Anyway, it's a very interesting book. It's very well written. Platonoff, Platonoff has a really odd style, and he plays a lot with language. I'm sure that they worked really hard trying to, give us the accurate playfulness. He's playful in his use of language, and it's kind of he's often making jokes on totality and totalization and the totalizing of all this government and these local farms. And the total another joke, that's one of the jokes that keeps permeating throughout it all. Anyway, and there's a sort of a philosophical through it, and there's a great deal of kind of compassion just for people who don't have anything. And Platonov had a lot of trouble because he wrote about what he saw at this time, and he had a lot of trouble. He was actually a laborer. He worked, I guess, on the farms. He was a man who worked with his hands as well as wrote books, and had some trouble with the government, who didn't want to publish his books. Anyway, I don't want to say much more than that. It's worth it. This is not the first place I would go to read him. I enjoyed it. I don't know that it's a little bit more of a satire on that political period than the other work I've read of his, but it shows you what he can do. It shows you some of his great talents. I would read a little small part just to give you a flavor of his prose. Here's a guy named Voshev. I think Voshev is just a kind of a laborer. Pure mountain water. He's one of the first characters that show up at the beginning of the book. The closest I can think of to Platonoff in America is he's a little Steinbeckish. So this compassion for all these different classes of people working the country and working the countryside and working as farmers, you can see a little bit of, and the political affinities of Steinbeck. I can see a little of them. He writes very differently from Steinbeck, though. Anyway, here's him sitting down in the road at one point early in the book. He was unable to keep treading the road for long, and he sat down on the edge of a ditch, not knowing the precise construction of the whole world and where it was he should aim for. There's a kind of poetic vision in almost every one of his sentences. Exhausted by scant reflection, Voshev bent down and laid himself in the dusty roadside grass. It was hot. A day wind was blowing, and cocks were crowing in some village. Everything had abandoned itself to meek existence. Nice line. Only Voshev had made himself separate and silent. A dead, fallen leaf lay beside Voshev's head. The wind had brought it there from a distant tree, and now this leaf faced humility in the earth. Voshev picked up the leaf that had withered and hid it away in a secret compartment of his bag, where he took care of all kinds of objects of unhappiness and obscurity. You did not possess the meaning of life, supposed Voshev, with the miserliness of compassion. Stay here, and I'll find out what you lived and perished for. Since no one needs you, and you lie about amidst the whole world, then I shall store and remember you. The notion that he's going to remember this fallen leaf is sort of a theme of this book, which is trying to remember all these people who died and all these people who suffered in this kind of horrible period of history. Everything lives and endures in the world without becoming conscious of anything. said Volchev beside the road. Like the leaf, we don't know what's happening to us and what we're doing and what our world is doing to us. And he stood up in order to go, surrounded by universal, enduring existence. It's as if some one man or some handful of men had extracted from us our convinced feeling and taken it for themselves. Somebody is taking our lives and our understanding of our lives from us. Anyway, that's just one paragraph. There's a lot happening in his books. I'm not even coming close to giving you an idea of what kind of writer he is, but he's worth reading. And we'll be reading some more Platonoff, and we'll definitely do Shevengor as soon as we can. All right, stay safe. Happy bathing. Bye.